Bases dropped on another week of Soccer Down here. It's April 6th. It's a Monday. We'll be taking your questions, your comments throughout the show today at Soccer Down here on Twitter. There is some news, some expected news at least, to get into, and we'll start to talk about it because it does set the roadmap a little bit about what could happen once games are allowed to be played. And I guess just first off, before we start getting into the weekend and everything from it, I have seen just wild speculation across the board about there's not going to be a season, period. MLS, there's no season that's going to get played. I don't know if that is the way to be thinking just yet. I mean, I think the number one thing here is we don't know. Like, nobody does. I mean, when you hear the experts of the experts talk about this, they're still learning about it. I mean, we had the first case of an animal getting it from a person over the weekend. That was not expected to be able to happen. So I think making bold proclamations about not expecting a season is early in the process here. And I get very frustrated when that's happening without making it very clear that it is a personal opinion. Look, this whole thing is scary and horrifying, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think we all know that at this point. And that's going to affect what happens next. But I also think it is not going to be a situation where there is not an attempt to get back to normalcy for a lot of different reasons, and not just economic, for mood, for morale, for all kinds of things. Sport's going to have a role to play in that. Is it going to look normal? We don't know. Is it going to be in July? Is it going to be in September? Is it going to be in November? We don't know. Nobody does. So I think that's the number one thing to keep in mind with all of this is you've got situations where, and we'll get into it, there's some expected information coming from FIFA this week about what they will do as the world governing body to create that pathway for action to resume. There's also information about the NBA looking at potentially not finishing their season because they don't know if they're going to be able to do that. I don't know what their timelines are for the next season or anything like that either. So you're getting all of it at once because everybody's trying to figure it all out at once. That's why I think bold predictions about playing in May or not playing until 2021 are kind of reckless at this point. So I wish we knew more. I wish we had a sense of when normal life will resume. We don't. And it sucks. It absolutely flat out sucks that that's where we're at right now. But that is where we're at. So, I don't want to take hope away from people who want to have games to watch and have, if they can be in the stands together, see their friends. It's not a small thing. And I think when people diminish the power of sport, they're really missing out on how important it is. I'm not the only one who can speak to this. There are plenty of people who have worked in sport for social change and studied the effects of this. It's something that in the United States, honestly, is not studied the way it should be. Sport is a very powerful thing in a country. And I think that every country is going to want to get sport resumed. We've talked about the economics of it. That's absolutely a factor. But the power of it that is hard to quantify is also a factor. Whether you're talking about kids being able to practice and play together, going to watch a game with your family, losing yourself in that for a while. That's all stuff that I think will be needed. And as soon as it is safe to resume, and that's the number one thing, I think everybody understands that at this point. The problem is none of us know when that's going to be. None of us know when that safety is going to be able to be achieved. So making statements that are personal opinions at this point about something like this are dangerous if they're not said as personal opinions. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if much of anything makes sense at this point, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we're all kind of figuring it out as we go, but that's real to me in that we don't know what's next. You could see action sooner rather than later. You could see it far later. You might not see it until 2021. Nobody knows. And I think people trying to predict it right now are honestly wasting their time because we don't know how this is going to play out. This weekend was a weird one. You had an event. It was not live. It was taped, but WrestleMania happened, and it was bizarre to watch it. And knowing it wasn't live, knowing that it had been taped, and some of the stories about how they were able to get this done, I do think it was a good thing that it happened. I mean, for me, personally, this is just absolutely, how it affected me. It was nice to have something completely different to watch and to suspend the disbelief, be a kid a little bit, and watch wrestling, even though there was no audience, and it was very strange. And I'll tell you one thing that stands out is how hard it is to be a commentator with no crowd. And that's something that, hey, we might have to figure out how to do ourselves. We don't know. But it was nice to have something different, and it just kind of reinforced for me the power of live, and in the WrestleMania sense, I will put air quotes on it, sporting events to watch and lose yourself in. There was a lot of debate about whether it should have been done or not. And, when you're talking about sports entertainment, you can make up the rules as you go. And they definitely did that with how they presented this. But it just reinforced that to me that, man, when you can have that first MLS match, that first national team match, that first Champions League match, those things are going to have more meaning than we have ever seen before for a regular season match or for a big match. They're all going to be so warmly received when it is safe to do so that I can't wait for that day.
When you mention entertainment, and I think having fresh entertainment in the sense of that's what the E and WWE is, World Wrestling Entertainment. When you have fresh entertainment for folks to gravitate toward, it gives you that escape that you haven't had in however long it has been in each individual case. And you have to give them and their creative team a lot of credit for trying to figure out how to do something like this with the restrictions that were there, with the restrictions that have been posted, and to have it be what it was. So I think that, you have to give them a lot of credit for thinking outside the box in this situation and for pulling off what they did. To your point about community, I would just ask folks to think about where they are in the footprint. You could be listening live, you could be listening on delay, you could be listening in SDH HQ here in Georgia, you could be listening here in the Southeast, and we have friends who listen outside the country. Think about what it means to have something to support, to leave your house, leave your apartment, leave your dorm room, leave whatever, to sit there and be able to go somewhere and rally around that element of your community. And you had mentioned this, and what it means for someone to tie into those most basic parts of community. Hometown team, favorite high school, favorite college, favorite team regardless of level, semi-pro, pro, what have you. And to have that opportunity to leave your house, to sit there and put the gear on, to sit there and, however you want to support what's going on in your community, to have others who have that shared interest that you have, and to be able to assemble freely and sit there and for however long, hour and a half, 2 hours, if it's baseball, however long baseball goes these days, depending on game to game. Whatever your favorite sport is, whatever your favorite attachment is to your community, whether you grew up with it, whether you're transplanted, and whether you drop in. To have that sense of community and support means volumes. It doesn't matter what time of year it is, because sport, obviously, 24/7, 365. It's a fall sport. It's a spring sport. It's a summer. It's something that crosses over multiple seasons. But to have all of that stuff that you can rally around, I think that sometimes folks, I'm not going to necessarily say lose the idea of what it means, but I think that sometimes it might get put off to the side. And when we get that opportunity to share that sense of community again, I think that it'll be a reminder of how important it is, but at the same time, it's something that we can sit there and jump out and be a part of all over again, and it just reinforces what community means.
Yeah, I think at times there's just this idea that sports aren't important. It's just whatever. And generally those are people who aren't involved in it. I think, you've seen it at the high school level across the state of Georgia. I've seen it with, kids who need, something positive in their lives and how much sport can affect it, all the way up to the pros. And, I think all of us who are listening to this and are interested enough in soccer, remember those heroes that we had as kids. And right now, kids aren't able to watch their heroes. That's it has an effect. It's not good. It's something that you want to get back to when it's safe to do so. So I don't think any of us really know when that's going to be. And that's the scariest part of all of this. But, if everybody can put in the work, and right now that work is honestly staying at home and avoiding interaction and doing the anti-community kind of things that we all want to do, you got to do that in the short term to be able to get back to it in a safe way as soon as possible. And hopefully that can happen. And hopefully, the effects, even though the numbers are not going to reflect it this week, and that's going to be a wake-up call potentially, it is having an effect. I mean, if you're looking at some of the studies being put out there, you're listening to the experts in the field, that curve has slowed, hasn't gotten to where you want it to be, and it won't for a while, but it's slowing. So all of this is having an effect, even if some of the other numbers are going to point you in a different direction this week. Just got to get through it. And I think this weekend for me, watching WrestleMania and not seeing the spoilers, which was good. I'm glad it wasn't that for me, and getting to watch it as a kid again, and just watching wrestling, even though some of it was borderline wrestling. If you're talking about a Firefly Funhouse bizarre acid trip of a sequence,
that's the way to do it.
I don't know if that's the way to do it, but anyway.
I was going to say that's the best way to phrase probably what that segment was, because acid trip, I think, is what I saw a lot when it was being referred to the Firefly Funhouse segment. Yeah,
that's what it seemed like. I will much prefer the Roadhouse ripoff of the Boneyard match, which was pretty fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun, and I will be happy to have pro wrestling and all of the other live events back that give us that fun that we all need right about now, because everybody's getting riled up, everybody's getting antsy, everybody's getting claustrophobic in different ways, everybody's getting stir crazy. It's all part of it, and it'll be a good thing when we have some diversions to get back to here soon.
So what news would you like to start with first? FIFA?
Well, yeah, that's the big one. Story in the Athletic that FIFA is going to make an announcement here coming up, and John's got the details.
Yes, he does. Article from Hughes, Whitwell, and Crafton. And the article says that FIFA is to confirm an indefinite extension to the 2019-2020 season across the globe, allowing each country's football authority to determine when campaigns can finish. The plans, likely to be revealed in the next 48 hours, will afford maximum flexibility, with FIFA appreciating the spread of coronavirus is different in each country. Comes after UEFA last week committed to finishing the current season and was moved to deny a report that its own president, Alexander Sefrin, had set a deadline of August 3rd to complete all outstanding games.
Well, you left a very big part of it out in the second paragraph. They will also alter the dates of the summer transfer window and permit contract extensions for players whose deals run out on June 30.
Yes.
That's kind of important here in the MLS side of things, because the 2019-20 season obviously doesn't affect MLS because it's just a 2020 season. But that summer window changing will affect things like Barco, Pitti, potentially drawing interest from Europe. The contract extension part, we'll have to see on the loan side of things if that affects Manuel Castro. That affects Jurgen Locadia in Cincinnati. Remember, his loan was only for the first half of the season before Cincinnati had to make a decision. The question that it doesn't necessarily answer yet is the situations where a player's contract ended in the summer and they have already signed a pre-contract that was supposed to start July 1st. I'm assuming they will correct it to where that new contract will start when the new season starts. That would make sense. I don't know if that's actually possible with contracts being signed. We'll have to see how that gets worked out, because of Ziyech going from Ajax to Chelsea is probably the biggest example of that, of a player who's out of contract. And now players whose deals would put them out of contract on June 30th, it could be extended. So is it just a case-by-case situation? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. This is going to be all kinds of complicated as financial realities start to kick in. And that's a big part of the argument that is going on in England, which is, look, it's an absolute embarrassment, to be perfectly honest, to see the players and the league arguing over chunks of money at this stage. There's far more important things. And there's a couple realities in it about, trimming pay or deferring pay or whatever. This is the big one. I mean, this is from the article at The Athletic this morning. There are significant fears that the 20 sides may yet need to repay £762 million to broadcasters should the season not be completed. You take that amount per club out of the budget, and payrolls are going to get difficult to meet. That's just a flat-out reality. That's life. And this argument that is going on about what's right, what's wrong, trying to portray it as the players don't want to have their salaries cut because then taxes won't go to the National Health Service, that feels like a bit of a reach. I don't know if that is how they're actually feeling, or that's the excuse for not wanting to have their pay cut. I understand not wanting to have your pay cut. I totally understand that. But if you're going to take 20 million or 20 sides paying £762 million back, and the way it's written, I'm assuming that 762 is what directly went to clubs, not went to the league and then was divided up. I mean, what, you're talking 38 plus 38 million pounds per team? That's not chump change. That's not a small amount. And also, you're taking out gate fees. You're taking out lots of other revenue that is going to hurt some of these teams. Now, here's another fact in this, and this is something that I think a lot of players and players associations are pointing towards. Have clubs mismanaged their finances? Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of them who have. That's why there's a bunch of clubs that were already in financial trouble. But what's better for the game right now? Getting all of your contract, but either putting a club out of business or making them unable to compete at the level they're at, or deferring it in a case where you have a contract for multiple years and you can defer it until later, or taking a voluntary pay cut right now to keep the club functioning, and that's including staff. For me, clubs going out of business is going to take jobs away from players as a whole. You know, you're not going to have an immediate club just jump back up into that same level. You're not going to have an immediate replacement. So you're going to, which I think is already understood at this point, salaries are going to go down. Transfer fees are going to go down because clubs are not making enough money to pay what they used to pay. That's just common sense. So that's a reality. But do you want less options for players as a whole? Do I think a Premier League club is going to go out of business and not be able to function next season? Probably not. I don't know if I would say there's a guarantee of that, but probably not. Could a championship club? Yeah. And that's second division. Third, fourth?
No doubt.
I mean, there's a lot of clubs in serious financial trouble coming into this without losing any of the revenues they were expecting this year. That's England. Get to Scotland, you've got a lot of clubs in trouble. And Aberdeen has been out in front talking about what they've done, how they've tried to mitigate this, how they're trying to handle it. They've been very forthcoming with the reality of it. And they're looking at losing millions of dollars this season, period. And they're trying to figure out a way to keep things functional. Luckily, they don't have a bunch of debt. They can manage this a little bit easier than some. Others don't have that luxury. And you add these losses on top of serious debt already, and you're going to have some clubs that you know very well that are not going to look the same on the other side of this. And that's just a fact. You know, MLS, I think we're lucky that the single entity structure will help spread the hit around, and the stronger clubs will help support the weaker clubs. It's going to help in the Major League Soccer standpoint. USL Championship doesn't have that. There are clubs that were, you know, not precarious that I knew of coming into the season, but were there clubs that, you know, we've kind of looked at and wondered, all right, what's next for them? Are they going to be able to grow? Because I don't think they survive at the level they're at. This is going to accelerate that. League One, you're talking about a smaller margin, which helps because it's easier to manage, but it's going to hurt these clubs. NISA clubs, you know, NPSL, and John, you've talked to a lot of NPSL and amateur clubs around the country. You know, when you're talking about Little Rock Rangers, our friends out in Arkansas, what, potentially losing $40,000?
Yeah, that's the number that was put out there because of all the investment that was anticipated for this season.
Well, I mean, that would be investment that was already made, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and stuff that has been put into having this season go, whether it's ticketing, merchandising, facilities, all those day-to-day things that you think of that was put into this idea of an anticipated season that no longer exists at present.
And some of that can carry over and be used in the next season, but some of it can't. It's sunk. That's the reality that the United States is facing. You know, every other country has a ton of different issues. We've talked about them in Argentina on soccer over there and here on soccer down here as well. You've got a lot of clubs that are struggling financially and have to sell players to balance the books. Well, that's where it gets complicated. Is one, now you don't know when you're going to be able to do that. And two, you go into the market knowing that you're not going to see the same amounts of money that you might have seen before. these are the realities facing the game going forward, and it's honestly scary around the country, around the world, because this is going to have an effect, and teams that we know and love are going to either suffer, have to reorganize, or in some cases go away. That's the scary element of this. The Bundesliga has talked about this in pretty strong detail. We haven't heard much about all of the financial hits in Italy and Spain yet, but you know they're going to be strong. You know they're going to be massive. And can a Real Madrid handle this? Yeah, probably, because they have a ton of money already. They've made money, and they've kept their money for the most part. But even a club like Barcelona is going to take a hit here. Big clubs are going to take hits. Smaller clubs, it can be catastrophic. And that's what we're going to see coming on the other side of this. But this statement from FIFA and the announcement that should be coming, in the next couple of days? Yeah, 48 hours.
Yep.
This was the decision that we've talked about for the last couple of weeks that needed to be made. Were you going to scrap the 2019-20 season and act like it didn't happen and just get ready for 20 and 21? Or were you going to finish the current season no matter what and then get to 2021 when it happens? And that's what has been chosen, is finish the current season whenever that happens. And I would assume that there's going to have to be some kind of organization once we get far enough along to know when that can be. Is it by the end of August? Is it by the end of September? Is it by the end of October? Does the next season in Europe start in January? Who knows? I don't think anybody has a sense of that yet. But you had to decide, were you going to scrap it, leave the transfer window where it is, and move forward? Or were you going to finish, put everything on hold, and finish what has already started? They've chosen that, and that guides the next decisions going forward.
And you look at this particular idea, and I want to see how it ends up playing out in each individual country. And I know that each individual country might have a different idea as to how things go, and it's related to the pandemic and its spread and getting over the curve, and how does it flatten, and when does it go down? And so if this comes to pass in the next 48 hours, then we now get to look at it on an individual per country basis. So that's the next step, hopefully, in all of this in the coming days.
And we're going to start to hear about players potentially moving. You're going to start to hear about rumors of that. But right now, what this decision from FIFA does is it allows countries to take their time to make the decisions that they need to make. And it allows UEFA and CONMEBOL and the rest to take time to make the decision that needs to be made. You don't have to rush into anything. Now, the next step for these leagues is, okay, and this is why this is important for the Premier League, for example. £762 million. That's what they'd have to pay back if they don't finish the current season. Well, it sounds like they're going to finish the current season. Now, there's a different conversation with your broadcasters in the different ways this could have been handled. If they came out and said the current season has to be done by June 30th, that's it, and the transfer window starts July 1st, we are preparing for 2021 starting July 1st. If they had said that, then the Premier League has to make decisions on how you're negotiating with your TV partners that we're not finishing all these games, because it wouldn't happen. Now, it's a different conversation. Remember an earlier report that we had that, according to the contract, it had to finish by July 31st. Well, maybe it doesn't do that, but you're discussing an extension of time versus not fulfilling the amount of games in the contract. That's a different conversation. Are you going to take a financial hit for that? Probably, because that's how contracts get negotiated. But is it completely catastrophic in £762 million? No, probably not. Probably not, because you're going to deliver the games that you said you were going to deliver. This opens the door for leagues to go back to their TV partners and say, yes, we know we're not giving you games right now. We know we were all planning on giving you games. Everybody's figuring this out. You're going to get the games that you paid for. Now, can you pay us something right now so our clubs can keep staff and keep things moving? That's going to be the negotiation. And that's what Germany was preparing to do, was preparing to ask for that payment with the understanding that games were going to get played. We'll see how England handles it, and we'll see how every country handles it. But this gives that direction. It's not going to the TV partners and saying, we're not going to be able to play these games. Now what do we do? Games are going to get played, it sounds like. At least that's the plan right now. Just don't know when. And it could be far later in the year. But I think you're going to see a 2019/2020 season get completed in most countries. And then a full 2020-2021 season get played. It's not going to be on the same calendar that it usually has been.
And I know that we've discussed Premier League teams in the past, and obviously the two that stick out would be Burnley and Bournemouth. And last week we had mentioned, and you had brought up, possible £50 million losses from Burnley, and this was what the club had put out there.
Yep.
That Burnley could lose £50 million if things go one way as opposed to another. And for a club like Burnley to lose £50 million is catastrophic. And I mean, they have learned and they have figured out how to do things economically and be responsible about it. And Sean Dyche has done a tremendous job with both the budget and the talent that has been put there with him. But for a club like that to lose mid-8 figures to the left of the decimal would be catastrophic in the long run for them.
So in England, DAZN, which holds rights to stream English matches in Brazil, Canada, Japan, and Spain, they're in negotiations with the Premier League to halt payments until there's clarity on when and how the season can be completed. This is starting now, and this is where things get very difficult. You still got the talks between PFA and Premier League clubs, and they got nothing done this weekend, which is, again, a very disappointing thing to see. There's far more important things, and there should be some different conversations being had. But Sean Dyche, he said over the weekend that Burnley would lose £50 million if the season is not finished, period. Now looks like there could be a way forward on that. Dyche talked about players and staff and some of the complicated decisions, and he said it's important to remember that it is not from the players. It is not their decision to furlough staff. I can assure everyone I know for a fact that individual players are doing things from their own pockets for different causes. What happens then is they do all that, and someone comes along and says, right, we are taking this from you, and they go, hang on a minute, I'm already doing all this. You have to be careful and remind people that a lot of players are giving a lot at the minute. And that's why when all of this is so all over the place, not being handled in organized fashion, leaders are not stepping up and sorting it out, that's where you're getting all of this stuff. That's why you're getting the Players Association fighting with the league about 30% deductions in pay, and nothing is coordinated. And people are going to have to be able to get over their issues with all of this and move forward. The more that things get bogged down in conversations like this, the harder it is to get a resolution on how you're going to finish the season and move forward. And that's the last thing that's going to be needed, because when you can move forward, the league's going to want to do that. I think the clubs are going to want to do that, because then you're going to, not just all the intangibles of getting back to normal and providing that morale for your supporters, all of that stuff, you're going to be able to start bringing money back in, period. Even if it's behind closed doors for a while, you're going to be able to bring at least the TV money back in. And those things are going to be critical, because, I think we all know how this goes. Bills pile up.
Yes, they do. And the the PFA, and this was part of the letters that they put out over the weekend, in discussing it about the impact that 30% would have, quoting from their statement, taking a 30% salary deduction will cost the exchequer substantial sums. This would be detrimental to our National Health Service and other government-funded services. The proposed 30% salary deduction over a 12-month period equates to over £500 million in wage reductions and a loss in tax contributions of over £200 million to the government. So that's part of the point that they're trying to make as a part of this.
I understand it, but I think there's a better way to make the argument than that. I think there's a better way for everybody to come to a resolution than that. You know, the league should create a fund. The Players Association should create a fund for the National Health Service if that's what they want to do. There's better ways to figure this out. The posturing, it's coming off like posturing.
Yeah.
And that's a problem right now. It's not what's needed to move things forward and to try to get things done. All kinds of like rumors and things are popping up now that I think you start to have an idea that, okay, you're going to finish the season and the transfer window is going to be pushed off. I mean, crazy things like we've talked about Icardi going back to Milan, and this idea that Juventus and Real Madrid are interested in Mauro Icardi. Okay. Don't know about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, ideas that now Inter will try to sign Lionel Messi if he can't agree to a new contract with Barcelona. Okay. Sure. All kinds of madness. And that's where this is going to go on multiple fronts, because you're going to have the logistical madness of waiting until you can play games, figuring out when you can play games, how that looks when you get back to action, combined with all the financial issues. And then the typical transfer madness that is going to be even more mad with the situation that is now in front of these clubs. You're going to have clubs that have to sell players, period. That didn't want to, that didn't plan to, they're going to have to. That's going to happen. But you've also got this situation with the best player in the world in Lionel Messi, who is feuding with his club. And he could end up on the market, which nobody expected. And who knows what that means. You know, this is all just, it's going to get wilder once we get far enough along in all of this to where you start to look forward to dates of when action will resume. That's when it's really going to kick off. And that's when it's really going to get wild, because you've got a lot of situations that on the soccer side, and it does involve the front office side of it, because that's going to affect some of the soccer decisions. All of that is going to be a crazier situation than we have ever seen, period. I mean, maybe since the Bosman rule went in, and which allowed more transfers, which allowed players who were out of contract to move. Probably since then. It's going to be the craziest offseason whenever that happens that we've seen in the world's game.
I mean, I have seen transfer stuff of Harry Kane to Real Madrid, Alexis Sanchez to West Ham. I mean, that's just the beginning of some of the other stuff that I've seen. So, yeah, I mean, teams are going to have to meet their new bottom lines. They're going to have to figure out what their new normal is. And the landscape is going to be different. How different, we don't know. But each team in all of the leagues that we follow is going to have to look at things through a new prism. And some of your favorite players that you've associated with certain teams and certain leagues around the planet, it's going to look different, and they're going to be in different places. It is going to look vastly different when we get through into the new normal.
What do we have on the Twitters this morning?
Let's see. What do we have on the Twitters this morning? Couple of folks link to the Simon Hughes article for us. Nathan Pugh, MLS was going to be able to finish before the end of the year anyway, so with FIFA's news, up the Reds, thank goodness.
We'll see. I do think MLS plays a 2020 season. I don't know if it looks like a normal season or not. I don't know when it finishes. We'll have to see, but I do think they play a 2020 season of some sort, and does it become a 2020/21 season? Who knows? I mean, I think everything's on the table right now, but do they want to play all the games in the season that has currently started? Yeah, I think they do, and I think they'll try to find a way to make all of that work. And I think this idea that, well, the next season has to start at a certain time is just honestly not true. Because just like this season, it's already been talked about, you could move MLS Cup back to mid to even somewhat late December. If you played at a neutral site, if you do whatever, you could do the same next year. So if you have to go even further back, if you have to get things sorted out to get the season finished, well, then you do what you got to do for the business. And then you start the next season when you can start it for the business. And that's where it's going to be. And as we've talked about with the other competitions that are involved, U.S. Open Cup, CONCACAF Champions League, everything else around it, Leagues Cup, those things are secondary to the MLS domestic campaign. And if that means MLS is going to be at a bigger disadvantage next year in CONCACAF, if CONCACAF doesn't want to move back, then that's the case. And you just chalk it up and you go do whatever you can do. You do the best you can. If your season starts later, you're going to run into situations like that. The Open Cup in 2020, I think it's going to be borderline impossible to have anything with competitive integrity right now that would look like last year did. I don't think the pro teams are going to be able to participate. I don't think they're going to have the time in their calendars to do it. And if that's the case, that's the case. That has to take a back seat. Everything else has to take a back seat because MLS teams, their bottom line is determined by regular season games. That's the number one important thing. It affects their sponsorships. It affects their TV. It affects their gate money. All of it. So you've got to get those games played as close to completion as possible and get it finished when you can get it finished. As soon as you can, but that is what it is. I don't know what it looks like. I don't think there's a guarantee that MLS finishes its 2020 season by the end of the year. I don't think it's a guarantee. I don't think anything's a guarantee right now. That's just kind of where my head's at. So, do I think they get a season played? Yep. I'd be blown away if we get to that point that it's just, no, we're not even going to try to resume the season. We're not even going to try to complete it. I don't see it getting to that point. But it's my opinion right now, and I just think that that's what you're going to try to do is get this thing done. We'll have to wait and see. I have no idea when that's going to be, and no idea how that looks when it gets started. But I think the effort is going to be there to get a 2020 season played, and I do think they get one played. I just don't know if it finishes in 2020.
Yeah, right there with you. Some news out of Serie A in just a sec from the Garlic Bread Warlord, Nick Alifi. The second point from Nathan this morning goes to what we talked about a little bit in the first half hour, and he wonders if the change in the transfer window will still tempt Barco and PT away.
Oh, who knows? I mean, it's all different at this point because, well, Pitti. Okay, let's parse through that for a second. Do they want to play in Europe? Yes. And is that going to go away because of this? No. Do they get the offers that are needed for them to go? That we don't know. The clubs that we're talking about, Ezequiel Barco, reportedly, some of them probably going to be fine coming out of this financially and be in a position to buy. Others won't be. I don't think this idea that, an Inter, for example, is going to have the money to spend on all these different players. I don't think they're going to have it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to take a big hit. I don't know. Sporting Lisbon, I don't know what the effect could be for Sporting in Portugal. For Manchester United, yeah, they're probably in a financial position to be able to get through this. Arsenal, you would think that they would be in a financial position to get through this. and come out and maybe potentially look to buy. The biggest thing is we don't know when the transfer window is going to be, and we don't know how many games are going to get played before that. So were they ready to buy now, or did they want to see more? And that's what we just don't know. Pitty's in a different conversation. Pitty's in an interesting one because we know his talent. We know what he can bring to the table. He's a little bit harder one to predict on how he does for you because of consistency. He's not a steady player. He runs hot and cold a little bit. Are clubs going to take a chance on a player like that right now? Don't know. Because it comes back to the conversation that is the most important about Atlanta, in that they don't have to sell anybody. They're not in a position where they're going to have to sell to balance the books. That's not going to happen here. So unless the player gets an offer from a club that they want to go to and puts that pressure on, you're not just looking to sell. Until we know when the window hits and until we have a better sense of, I think, the effects with different leagues and different clubs of the stoppage it's really hard to say, like, no, they won't go anywhere, or yes, they absolutely will go somewhere. I think we're all guessing right now, but until we know those things, I don't know. I think Pitty maybe is a longer shot now because of this in the short term. Barco, his age, his potential is not going anywhere. It just depends on the clubs that are interested in buying. Are they in a position to buy? Are they going to be ready to buy at that point?
News out of Serie A from Andrew Cesare of ESPN FC. Serie A announces that all players and managers across the league will take a pay cut of 1/3 of their wages due to the coronavirus crisis. They remain determined to finish the 2019-2020 season. The pay cut scheme does not include Juventus, who've already come to an agreement independently.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen more and more. And it just goes back to the decisions about, are you going to find a way to work together to keep the club as intact as you can be? Or is it going to be about the individuals right now? And there's not a correct answer. I mean, telling somebody to give up money is, no, that's not a place you want to be. To tell a player, like, yeah, you signed this contract, yeah, you've earned this money, but no, you should give some of it back. No, that's not my place to say. It's not anybody's place to say. But clubs are going to have a problem paying some of these contracts. That's a fact. When you don't have as much money coming in and you don't have those reserves that some clubs don't, you're not going to be able to pay. You're not going to be able to pay out. And then you have to make decisions on who doesn't get paid, or who gets furloughed, or who gets, let go. Those decisions do come at some point. When the players or the league or the clubs, or however this goes down, when they get to the point that they make that decision and say, we are going to defer, or we are going to take a pay cut in the short term, that slows down the effects of that lack of revenue. It does. I mean, that's again, it's just reality. Then you're keeping some money that you thought was going out. How long is that effective? It depends club to club. But that's the fear. I guess that's the biggest fear for me, is that you get to a point where clubs, say, we can't pay everybody that we have to pay this month. Who's going to go? And for some clubs, that decision's going to come up sooner than others. And that's what's hard about all this.
Michael Head has come in this morning, and he says, once again, something that we discussed to a decent amount in the first half hour. With all the uncertainty, what's your gut feeling on completing a full MLS season with fans in attendance?
I do think there's a strong potential that games get started behind closed doors, or at a minimum get started with limited attendance. Because I think you're going to want to get back to action as soon as possible for a lot of reasons. And it's not just financial. I think, the president didn't have a conference call with all of the heads of professional sports because he just wanted to check in. I mean, there is a push to get these things started again, economic reasons, but also psychological reasons. I think anybody who listens to this show is passionate about the sport, and we're all, suffering a loss right now in not having it. Not a financial loss. I'm just talking like a personal, emotional loss from not having games. Not having, even if they're behind closed doors, the community of discussing the game and yelling about a play and yelling about a player, being happy, being sad, being mad, being upset with a referee, all that stuff is ultimately good for most people. And you're going to want to get games played. So I do think there is a 2020 season. I do think MLS is going to prioritize playing a 34-game schedule. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what the timeline looks like. Nobody does. And I do think that if the decision comes down to we can start a week or 2 weeks earlier, but it has to start behind closed doors or it has to start with limited attendance, you're going to do that because every week will give you more opportunity to get games in. And every game that you get in gives you more of that normalcy, even if it's not normal in that it's behind closed doors, but normal in that people can watch, people can listen, people can talk about it, people can get excited about it or get riled up about it. All those things that we all kind of thrive on when it comes to sports. So I do think that if they have to start behind closed doors or with a limited crowd, they will.
And then last one on the board here for our number one on the Twitter is Chris Hutchison says, when we get through this pandemic and life returns to normal, let's have a mass mask burning event. # flatten the curve.
I mean, you might want to hold on to them and keep them ready for whatever could happen next, because that's also a possibility here is that, this doesn't 100% go away for good. And I guess this is maybe driving some of the people who are saying, well, I don't think we're going to play at all because you could get a second wave of this or you could get a wave in the fall or whatever. I'd like to think that people would be in a better position to deal with it and mitigate it by that point. I hope to think we learn something from this. Maybe I'm being naive and thinking that we'd learn from mistakes that were made in dealing with this. Fingers crossed. But yeah, you might not want to burn it just yet. You might want to wait on that one. But as soon as it is safe to do so, a celebration of getting through this and a celebration of things getting back to normal, 100%. I think that's going to happen with the first game, the whatever it looks like. That's going to happen, and those things are going to be very, very special and things that we'll probably all remember for the rest of our lives.
Let's see. We're caught up on Twitter. I do have a couple of questions to the floor for the morning, and I have a question for you for the morning as well.
Well, why don't you ask your question to me first, since I'm right here.
Okay. All right. We've had the first couple of matches that have been rebroadcast on 92.9 The Game, and those have been fun to revisit in whatever form folks want to revisit them in, and I've seen all the responses on social media and what it's been like to go back over these moments of history for Atlanta United. But what I wanted to ask you about it, and I'll probably ask Mike Conti about it the next time that he's on with us, what's it like for the two of you to go back and revisit these matches, revisit all of the energy, revisit the context, and just have a chance to see it again through a different lens?
Well, it's radio. We're not seeing anything through a different lens. We're hearing it through a different filter.
Speaker.
Maybe? Is that a better way to
Sure, why not?
Use that cliche?
There you go.
I don't like to listen to myself, period. So I actually have listened to most of these two games back. I don't like to listen to myself.
There with you.
I typically, like, when I get the recording of the broadcast, I might listen to certain things in it to see how we handled something, or to hear back, like, man, I thought we were all over the place in this segment, to see if we got it right and stuff like that. So I'll check like bits and pieces, but I don't generally listen back to the whole game. I know Mike does. Everybody's different with how you work to get better and prepare to get better and prepare for the next game and all those kinds of things. It's been kind of fun because there's been nothing else going on to listen to these and kind of have a flashback. The Galaxy game especially, because it was a late night game on a weekend. It was a long day. It was a really good performance, too. It was a really good win. So to hear that one back was kind of fun. And anytime to hear an Orlando game, because Mike and I are usually a little more nuts when Atlanta and Orlando play. True. It was fun. I hope people have enjoyed it. Those were two. I mean, the playoff games, I think everybody thinks of when you think of 2018, and hearing MLS Cup again will be fun. But the Galaxy game was the one that Mike and I both like had first on our list when we realized how many games we were going to get to pick. That was the first one we both had to play, because one, we figured that a lot of people didn't hear it because it was a late night game on a weekend, but also because it was such a strong performance that gets forgotten about that season. Like, you had an early season run after the season opening loss, up until the stumble with Kansas City and a red card and the crazy VAR stuff with the Red Bulls game at home. The team was so good early in 2018. I think at times people think like, oh, well, it was kind of a stumble and they got good late, or they got good late in the summer or whatever. They had a great run early, and that Galaxy game I thought was the best game in it. The LAFC win at home was really good. LAFC was not what they are now, and they were not, I think, what some people thought they were then. And they got exposed in that game in a big way. The Galaxy game on the road was a completely dominating performance. The Orlando game came later in that second run that the team had that was very strong. And Orlando played really well in that match. That was a really good match late in August in the 2018 season. And it was a lot of work for Atlanta to get the win. So to hear that one back and hear how competitive it was, that was fun. I'm just glad people have been able to listen and enjoy it, and it's been that distraction that we all need for right now. We all need those things to take our mind off of what's going on. Hopefully that's helped.
And the reason that I ask is because I know that us as broadcasters will sit there and we may listen to a whole thing, we may listen to segments, we may listen to certain calls. But I didn't. The reason I asked is I wanted to see that if listening to it through that second time, you picked up anything that might have added to context of the season on the whole. And you mentioned how well the team was playing at certain points. It's just I didn't know if there was. It's like watching a movie or a particular TV show for the second or third time. You're looking at a particular episode and going, "Oh yeah, I didn't notice that. I didn't pick that up until I watched it the second time." That's what I was trying to. I didn't know if there was any added context for you the second time around.
No, I mean just because I'm not watching it alongside of it. So I mean that's in my role. That's where I'm getting added context is watching things back to see like, well, I missed that live, or cool, I saw that run off the ball, or I saw that tactical move, stuff like that. So just hearing them back, just hearing the performance, and I hope that we captured it well enough, because those were two of the best regular season performances in 2018.
And my question for the day for everyone listening, today is the 25th anniversary of MLS beginning, correct?
Yep.
Okay. What is your first MLS memory? So that question to the floor.
The first broadcast.
Okay.
The first game, because I mean, I was excited to have a league to follow, period. We had, for me, pro soccer had only really materialized in my world the year before with the Atlanta Ruckus in the A-League. And, I mean, I studied the game and knew enough to know what was going on with the World Cup of '94 and MLS getting ready to start, and the A-League was trying to be that first division league, but they didn't get it. So MLS was going to be that league, and a lot of players in the A-League in '95 were going to move into MLS in '96, and I kept up with the teams getting announced. I mean, I was keeping up with all of it with Soccer America and message boards on Prodigy and CompuServe and stuff like that at the time. So, I mean, I knew what was happening, but to then actually have going from the A-League, which, look, the A-League to me was a big deal because it was the first pro soccer I ever saw firsthand, not including one indoor game with the Atlanta Attack. We would move to Kentucky when the 2 years the Attack existed in Atlanta, and indoors always been different for me. It's almost felt like something completely different. So I don't put it in the same bucket as outdoor soccer. So the Ruckus was very, very important to me. I was a senior in high school. I was graduating that summer of the Ruckus first season. So I was a little bit older, but still, I mean, players like John Doyle, I wanted to, play with the class that John Doyle had in those games. I wanted to be as explosive on the field as Lennon Steenkamp was at that time. Bruce Murray was the all-time leading scorer for the U.S. men's national team when he played here. I was passed by Winaldo later on, but I got a chance to see those guys at a high school stadium in DeKalb County. Now then take that to MLS the next year, and you're playing even sometimes in smaller crowds than you would like, but you're playing at Spartan Stadium in San Jose, which was a tiny little field, but was packed for that first game. You had, a huge crowd at the Rose Bowl for the Galaxy's first game. You were playing games at Ohio Stadium, at RFK, at Giant Stadium, big, big stadiums. So that changed the perception of everything for me. It's okay, now we're going from high school stadiums and a league that has 6 teams, and every one of them seems like they're on a razor's edge of existing the next week or not, to a professional league, a big professional league. It had 10 teams, it's more than 6, and we're playing in big venues and was on ESPN and was a big deal. So that was massive for me. I mean, I wish that for my development it had happened earlier, or I was born later and had more of a childhood growing up with it. Because, I mean, could that have affected me as a soccer player? Maybe. I don't know if it would have helped me not wreck my knee a couple times in a year, which probably had as much of an effect of me not having a chance to play further than anything. But it would have given me, I mean, I felt like 95, my high school senior season, and going into 96 and into 97 and 98, when I was watching games on a regular basis, MLS games were on a good bit. Not as much as they are now, but a good bit. You were also starting to get more games from Europe at the time. You were getting more national team games because you had a qualifying campaign. I was seeing more soccer. I felt like I was my best as a player at that point because it was in front of me. And you would see, I watched a lot of the DC United games that time. That was my team. And, seeing Jaime Moreno play, seeing Marco Echeverri play, you start to do things when you go play without thinking about it that you saw them do. So to have that, MLS having, 25 years since then, you've had that effect on kids. And we've seen it here. I mean, we've seen it straight away here in only a few years with not just kids wearing Joseph Martinez jerseys, but they score a goal and they want to celebrate like Joseph. They're doing things like with runs off the ball as the kids get a little bit older and they're paying more attention, or they've got a parent or a coach telling them, hey, watch what he does off the ball. Watch this, watch that. You're seeing kids emulate Atlanta United players after only a couple of years. You take that to Columbus, Ohio, you take that to D.C., you take that to Los Angeles, and kids who have grown up as Galaxy fans, like, you're getting that intensity of just being embedded in a soccer environment. That's going to help produce better players. That's going to make players better. It's going to make smarter fans. All those different things that happen from it. So, I mean, my memories of MLS starting was getting to see first-class professional soccer in this country with cities that I knew, with stadiums that I knew, on networks that I knew. That made it legit. And then just getting to watch a season play out with all the drama, all the different things that happen, and the great players that were involved, the effects it had on me, who was already incredibly passionate as a soccer player and fan and studying the game and trying to learn more every day about it, it just solidified all of that for me. And I'm sure that it's had similar effects on others, whether you had a chance to play in the league, work in the league, coach in the league, just be a fan from day one. Those things are very important, because if you don't have that, you're going to be very limited as a soccer country, period. And we saw that through the 80s.
Tafka says he was only 10 at the time, so his memories are very foggy, but the first thing I remember from MLS was wanting one of those Chicago Fire jerseys, obviously not the 96.
Yeah, that would have been in 98. And those were, the Fire nailed it with their branding straight out of the gate. They could have been the Chicago Rhythm. That was what Nike wanted the Chicago team to be. I think Peter Wilt had an argument. The league might have been involved. They might have just wanted to let Nike do whatever they wanted to do. But that team was going to be called the Rhythm. And that would have been awful. I mean, there's been questions, and people have said, well, why would you want to name the team after a huge disaster like the Great Chicago Fire? I get it. I get that. But over the time that the team has existed, I think they made the name work. I think they gave it, some strength. And outside of just the name, I thought the logo was strong. I don't know why they changed it. I thought the branding was strong. I thought everything around it was good. The biggest problem that the Chicago Fire have had in their existence has been putting on a crappy product. That's it. Like, it's so funny, like, as I'm researching, like, old NASL stuff and reading interviews with owners or GMs when a team starts, and some of them would start with, the branding and the outreach and this and that. And then others would be like, look, we have to put a good product on the field. And the teams that struggled generally were the teams that were bad. I mean, that's just a fact. And the Chicago, when they started, they were good. They won championship. They played in MLS Cups early on. Then in the first decade of the 2000s, they were strong. You had Cuauhtemoc Blanco. They were very good. Well, then, since Blanco left, they were very bad. And that's why fans stopped coming out. Bridgeview accelerated that, I think. If they had been at Soldier Field, maybe it looks different. I do think the move to Soldier Field is the right move for them long term. But the reason why the brand didn't work, the product was crap. Period. It's that simple. You didn't see until I think once the NASL matured a little bit, you didn't see a team come in and be successful on the field and fail completely quickly off the field. It didn't happen regularly, because Tampa Bay Rowdies. Let's talk about the Rowdies for a second. So the Rowdies, when they came in with their name, with their branding, the kick in the grass song, I mean, all that stuff, it all worked because they were good. They had a rivalry with the Cosmos. they had a player in Rodney Marsh who grabbed your attention and was wild and crazy and an amazing player. You had all that. It all worked because they were good. If you come in with all of that, like I'm trying to think. I think the Las Vegas Quicksilver.
Yes.
They were bad. The Colorado Caribous. They were a bad team. So people didn't care. If they'd been a good team, could it have worked? Maybe. We didn't get to find out. They were a bad team, so they didn't last. The Rowdies, it worked because they were a good team. The San Jose Earthquakes, when they started, it was a good product. People went. The Sounders, the Timbers, the Whitecaps, they generally put on a good product. And that's why they had staying power. The Quicksilver, not so much. The Tulsa Roughnecks. The Roughnecks were one of the biggest surprises in the North American Soccer League because nobody thought Tulsa would be a soccer market. Rochester's different because they were early. That doesn't actually apply here because you're talking about an American Soccer League team that moved over to the NASL in like 1970 when the league had 6 teams. It was basically like, do you have a money order that is valid for a little bit of money? Oh, you do? Okay. Do you have a place to play? Do you have uniforms? Do you have players? Okay, cool. Come on. Yeah, we'll take you. And they made it work for a while, but the league outpaced them. They weren't able to keep up. And not just because of the Cosmos effect. Like, they didn't have those resources. So they're a little different. They were able to survive in the early days of the league when it was, as the U.S. Soccer, the United States Soccer Football Association at that time, before they became the U.S. Soccer Federation. They said it in I think it was in the early 70s when Congress was exploring the antitrust situations with professional sports and how that seems to come up, every decade or so.
Yeah.
Where they decide to explore it and should they keep it, should they not keep it, should they extend it, whatever. Soccer, the federation was asked to submit a statement about it, and they're like, we have a semi-pro professional league. And this was like 1972, I think. So, yeah, Rochester could fit into that. But could Rochester fit once the glitz and glamour of the late 70s in ASL started? Not really. And they weren't very good at that point either, so that factored in. The Roughnecks started later, and they were maybe the biggest success story of the last era of the NASL because nobody thought Tulsa was a soccer market. Great branding. Great, ownership that was very locally based, and they put a good product on the field with a team that was competitive, and a team that wasn't built on superstars either. So it was kind of a way that, honestly, the league should have looked at to go forward. They should have learned more from that than they learned from the Cosmos, because the Roughnecks model was the sustainable one. And honestly, if you're MLS, you probably did learn more from the Roughnecks model than you did from the Cosmos model. You learned you didn't want teams to try to be the Cosmos because there's only a small number of ownership groups that can be that. The Cosmos could write off their losses in the 70s because they were owned by Warner Communications. And Warner looked at it as a way to spread the Warner brand worldwide. If you're the Cosmos, they send you out on a tour of Asia and they take Bugs Bunny with you, and there you go. You're out promoting the company. It's not about if you make money or not. You're a promotional tool. So they could go sign Pelé and try to sign Johan Cruyff and sign Beckenbauer and sign Canalia because it was just all about putting a big product on the field that won games, but also to promote the company. The Cosmos, it's funny, and I think the Once in a Lifetime documentary, which is a great one if you haven't seen it, nailed it. The Cosmos, now, the league was falling apart around them, but the biggest issue the Cosmos had was Atari collapsed. Like, the Warner Communications took such a hit on Atari that it's, okay, wait a minute, where are we losing money? Oh, we're losing money on the soccer team. Yeah, let's get rid of that. Like, that was a big factor here. So, It's MLS when it started. They looked at what the NASL went through. They looked at what other teams and leagues had done between 84 and 95. And they created a pathway forward that ultimately has been successful with modifications along the way. At first, it had a big splash. They struggled to grow from there in 97 and 98 and 99. Chicago went well. The Miami Fusion did not. A lot of that's down to ownership. They, in 2001, had to make the decision to contract Tampa Bay, who had never found a local owner, contract Miami because that owner didn't want to keep going, and reorganize into what has led to this, where they're at now, with 30 teams on the horizon. In 96, and this is what most people who were involved in the league at that time have said, if you had told them that in 25 years you would have a league that would be on its way to 30 teams and would be doing what it's done, they would not have believed you. So it is a big day. It is a big day for soccer in the United States. It's something to celebrate because it wasn't expected. It was not expected that this would be this big, this quickly. Does it still have room to grow? Yep. Does it look positive for that growth? Yeah, it does. It was not expected when MLS started. People hoped for 15,000 a game. People hoped to just keep it going. And it's become something completely different. And that's an amazing story. And MLS should be celebrated today.
KFC is in this morning and came across the AP article about the first match, titled "With One Goal, the first ever MLS game was filled with promise." And KFC says, the article about the league opening came across my radar yesterday. I just remember drawing the team logos, something I did for NBA teams as a kid, too.
Yep, I did it for baseball teams, for football teams. You know, my notebooks in elementary school had, the Braves A and all that kind of stuff on it. That was what you did. So soccer logos were a little more difficult to draw. There was a lot more intricate things going on, so they were a little tougher. I was not that good of an artist. Maybe Kefsi was a little bit better than me with his artistic work. So I will take Kefsi's word for it. I'm trying to remember the build up to it. I mean, I remember when Eurosport had MLS stuff the Christmas before the league started, and I think they had like a very basic T-shirt for every team with the team name like written in script on the front left chest and the team logo on the back real big. I remember those T-shirts. It was like you couldn't find stuff because it was all like and I wasn't in an MLS market. I don't know what it would have looked like in a Columbus or a DC or an LA, but it was hard to find in a mainstream sense at that time. It ramped up pretty big that first weekend. You just had the DC San Jose game the first weekend of the league. The next weekend is when everybody else started. I remember that second weekend, the Crew had their home opener against DC in front of a big crowd at Ohio Stadium, which you think the Spartan Stadium pitch, you think the Yankee Stadium pitch is small. Go look at Columbus Crew highlights from Ohio Stadium in their first couple of years. It's a high school field. Like, it's a bandbox because it was the old Ohio Stadium with the track. The field was maybe 60 yards wide. Maybe. And it was ridiculous. The games looked crazy there. The goal that I think Brian McBride scored, the first goal in Columbus Crew history, it's a great goal, but it's a punt that he heads to himself and volleys in. It's just goofy. That's what Crew games looked like at the beginning. The one that a lot of people talk about is that first LA Galaxy game hosting the Metro Stars, where They thought they'd have 25 to 30,000, and they ended up with 69,000. People just kept showing up, and they kept taking the tarps up off of sections, and eventually the fans just started moving into sections and taking the tarps up to sit. It was wild, and it was a big win for the Galaxy. The Galaxy were really good that year. They were really good early on. Jorge Campos, we know about Campos, but
yep.
You had some young American talent in that team, but you had a player in Mauricio Cienfuegos who was an amazing player. So much fun to watch.
Yep. That, for me, being a child of Los Angeles, I gravitated toward Cienfuegos and then Campos. Living here, I followed the Galaxy, and Kefsi has posted some of the drawn logos.
Oh,
found
that's awesome.
them. Absolutely found them. That's good stuff. And Tofka, along those same lines, says, "Oh man, I drew a lot of logos, even hockey. Man, I hadn't thought about that for years."
Yeah, I drew college logos too. I mean, I drew logos. If I was bored, it'd be like, all right, I'll try to draw a logo.
Tofka, along those same lines, says that I don't remember any particular player other than Valderrama. No clue what year it was. Could have been 1996 or 2001. Shrug shoulders emoji. Please don't shame me.
Oh, no shame. There's a really good piece over at Soccer America interview Paul Kennedy did with Eric Winalda about it, and just some of the early moments of things. He talked about the first game a lot, and he said that he had just found out recently that Chris Wondolowski was a 13-year-old, ball kid. Or no, he's not a ball kid. He was just there. He was a 13-year-old boy who was watching that game. That's the effect that MLS has had. Wondolowski, 13 years old at that point, sees Eric Winalda score the first goal in the first game, becomes a San Jose fan, and then eventually becomes a legend for the club. Bill Hamid does the same thing in D.C. He was in the stands at RFK. That stuff is really big. This is a good one here. Check the article out at Soccer America first off. They're definitely worth a subscription if you're not subscribed. But Winalda was asked about the level of play and the level of players. He said, I think one of the things that people need to be reminded of is the infrastructure that now exists in Major League Soccer and the platforms these players have to play on and the beautiful stadiums, and just that part of it really changes this conversation and this answer. He said, Taylor Twellman asked me earlier today who was better, Carlos Vela or Marco Echeverri. And I said it was an unfair question because it would have been great to see what Marco Echeverri at 26, 27 could do in the modern game in the stadiums that now exist in this league. And I made the analogy of this was the guy that was, painting in a cave with his fingers as opposed to a guy that has an open canvas and a $1,000 paint set. That's a good point. He talks about playing at the 60-yard wide fields. He said, so it was hard to find space out there. That's what made we have an appreciation for guys like Valderrama, Echeverri, because they found space where it wasn't there. I mean, Valderrama, who was doing 1-2s in a phone booth, and players like Steve Ralston were introduced to the world because they got world-class talent, and they became better players for it. You had, and I think this always needs to be remembered, Winalda, Tab Ramos, John Harkes, Marcelo Balboa, Alexi Lawless, Mike Burns was playing in Europe at the time, Clay Koyman was playing in Mexico. You had national team players that were playing around the world. I think Kobe Jones spent some time in England, also spent some time in Brazil. You had U.S. national team players that were trying to chase their professional dream, and pretty much all of them came back to help launch MLS and play in it at the beginning because their star power was needed. I mean, Lawless was playing in Serie A. Harkes was playing in the Premier League. I mean, you had guys that were playing in big places that, from a professional standpoint, should they have left? Maybe not. But they all came and did it. And Winalda said, and our coming back was to see a league of our own to see that opportunity for our country to enjoy everything that this league has become now. And that's critical. They sacrificed to make that move. And that's a very important part of the MLS story because, honestly, for their careers, they probably shouldn't have. But they did it to grow the game in this country, and it's absolutely had an effect.
Bartimus Prime has a couple of FIFA questions this morning using the hashtag Monday Mayhem.
Okay.
The first one. Given the likelihood Canada will miss the Hex again, what does this do to the progress they made?
Oh, it sucks. The way CONCACAF, and one thing to keep in mind, the qualification process might change because of all this. And maybe that helps Canada out. I don't know. The change in the qualification process, Canada is the one who was taking the hit because you didn't have that semifinal round where, do I think Canada could have gotten into the Hex ahead of El Salvador straight up? Yeah, I think Canada's a better team. But the Canadian, you think the U.S. Federation is mismanaged. The Canadian Federation's been even worse. And their FIFA ranking is low because of a period of them not being as strong as they could be. I think it is coming through for them. You're starting to get Canadian talent produced, and not making it this time around would be a very bad thing for them. It'd be good for Canada if they can get into this one. They'll be in a better position to do better in 26 when they get games at home. That's going to be a big deal. But the qualification process that took away the semifinal rounds that would have given Canada a chance to play their way into the Hex, huge detriment to them. Now, with the schedules changing potentially, now qualification right now is scheduled to start in September. They do have some space in the calendar between now and the 22 World Cup to get it done in the format that they have it. But they might find that it is better to go back to the older format to make it work, maybe, or some modification that might help Canada play their way in. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see if things change. But, yeah, Canada missing the Hex, huge. That's why I was blown away at how bad they were in Orlando against the U.S. in a game that a draw would have been amazing for them. They didn't need to win that game. A draw would have put them one into the Nations League semifinals, which would have been big for them, but a draw would have probably put them into the Hex. And they didn't play for a draw. They didn't play in any way that looked like they understood the situation. It was kind of shocking.
Second question from Bart this morning. Do you see FIFA relocating the U20 Women's World Cup from Costa Rica and Panama, or just pushing the dates back?
I don't think they relocate. I don't think they're going to want to relocate stuff. I think they'll push the dates back. I don't have the calendar in front of me with what's coming up in 21, but I think that would be the easiest thing to do, would be to just move it back. Don't have to look it up. I hear you pounding on the keyboard. Don't worry about it. It's not that critical. I think you're going to want to move it back because you don't want to pull it from them, move it somewhere else, which I don't think you're necessarily going to have to do. I don't know if you're going to be able to get it done by moving it right now. I don't think that happens. So I think they just delay it. What you would not want to do is cancel it and then Costa Rica, Panama go to the back of the line for hosting one in the future. And they do schedule those out, a few cycles in advance. That's the situation that, Atlanta's in with the Final Four. Tampa's in with WrestleMania and events like that have been canceled, and you have it scheduled out. I mean, the Final Four is booked through 26, 27. Yep. Atlanta absolutely got hosed, and the city's going to lose a lot of money. There wasn't a way to play it, don't get me wrong, but does it, does it stink? Does it feel like it's not fair? Yeah. But you can't just move everybody back and say, Atlanta gets the next one, everything else moves back a year. I don't think you could. I don't think you can pull that off logistically. If you could, that would probably be the most fair way. But otherwise, Atlanta's going to have to wait till 28 to get the Final Four. And that's a big hit. So in FIFA's case, I think they would like to keep the hosting cycle in the way that it's currently set up. They just, if that means moving it back and keeping it in the same place, that's probably what they do.
You had mentioned John Harkes and Tony Miola, Tab Ramos. This, I guess, is a programming question. Have you had the chance to see Soccertown USA yet?
I have not.
I have not either, and I was wondering if anyone had and what they thought. It is a soccer documentary about Kearney, New Jersey, and how they have been the hub for some of the early stars in U.S. soccer, and I hadn't had a chance to see it yet.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch that yet. When it comes to MLS celebrating everything today, ESPN2's got an MLS marathon starting at 6 o'clock, and they're showing the first game, the DC United San Jose game. There's a bunch of stuff on MLSsoccer.com. Highly recommended. A lot of good retrospective stuff. Other stuff is coming to the fore too, like oral histories and interviews and different things like that. So all kinds of MLS stuff you can dig into the rest of the day. I think MLS is doing a watch along of that first game on their digital channels at 4 o'clock with some special guests joining in. So all kinds of different things to look to. I mean, this I'm sure was planned to be something very different in terms of celebrating the league's first game and 25th year and the anniversary of that. It's not what they probably had intended, but they're coming up with as many different ways to do it as possible. The guest commentators on the MLS Digital Watch Along, which is on all of their social media channels at 4 o'clock today, David Goss, Bill Hamid, who was a DC fan from the very beginning and then went on to play for the club, Jeff Agus, who played for DC in that match, and Eric Winaldo's going to be on it. And Eric Winaldo with a mic in front of him is always entertaining.
Yes.
Especially in a situation like this where it is kind of freeform. So that might be a must-watch at 4 o'clock.
Yeah. I have been off the beaten track. Sunderland Till I Die Season 2 finally showed up last Wednesday, so I've been watching that and catching up on that right now. So that's where my TV programming has been recently.
Very nice. I watched both nights of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Enjoyed
didn't know what to think, but all accounts, the Boneyard match at the end of night, or the part of night one, drew raves, and the acid trip of the Firefly Funhouse apparently drew raves as well. I
thought that was too over the top. It felt too much like a comedy thing. The difficulty of doing it in the format that they had to do the event in, I thought they put on a good event. I was entertained. I watched both nights of it, watched almost all of it. It was really, really good. I'm glad they did it. I don't know, what effects it had on their financials. I'm sure it didn't help, but I'm glad they did it. At least me being selfish about it, like it was a release, because I do enjoy watching like old games and stuff, but it's never been like a huge thing for me. I kind of get burned out on it. I like live stuff. I'll watch a live game over a taped game every day. Yeah, that's just how I am. Even if it's a league that I don't follow like super close, I'll turn on the Argentine Superliga, before I'll go back and watch tapes of a game. That's just how I enjoy watching stuff. So to see a live event, even though it wasn't completely live, it was taped, it was live to me because I had not seen it and didn't know anything about how the results went. So they did a good job of keeping that under wraps. I watched that. A lot of music. Yesterday was the 40th anniversary of REM's first concert, so I had fun doing a long playlist on Twitter with that and watched a lot of old REM stuff yesterday. The REM by MTV documentary is a really good one if you haven't seen it. It's all of their interviews and footage from MTV performances, and they cut it with no narrator, with nothing else in it, just those interviews to tell the story of REM going from, launching to finishing. It was really well done. So, highly recommended.
There was, speaking of REM, I saw polls that were out in celebration of that anniversary, that the top 10 songs that are not named The End of the World as We Know It.
That wouldn't be in my top 10 anyway.
Yeah. So,
like, that's a good song, don't get me wrong, but it would not be in my top 10 REM songs at all.
No. I mean, I have a lot of their older stuff as a part of my top 10s and stuff like that. But yeah, End of the World as We Know It would not be a part of my top 10 either.
No, I'd have a lot of... I'd have some singles in there, but I'd have a lot of non-singles in there too. So I'd have to think about it. All
right. We are officially caught up on Twitters. What else is on your mind?
I think that's about it today. We will have another watch-along this week, maybe multiple. If we have multiple, we'll have one on Tuesday and Thursday. If we just have one, we will have one on Thursday. Actually, I think we're probably just going to have one this week. Maybe we do a morning one. If you have any games specifically you want us to dig into, let us know. Tomorrow is Tactics Tuesday. So all your tactics questions, we will do deep dives on tactics once we get caught up with the news of the day off the top. So wherever you want to go with it. We've talked formations. We've talked how tactics have developed in different countries. So anything is fair game. It is a Tactics Tuesday tomorrow morning on the show.
Roger that. Don't forget to follow, like, be a part of the conversation on all of our social media platforms. There's your blatant promo. And don't forget the Teespring store and gear that is out there as well. So if you want to show support for the show in visual form or contributory, so you can wear the gear, then there are ways to do that too. Don't forget to download the app if you haven't done that.
Yes, and check out our supporters as well. Steve Apolinsky and Associates, aa-legal.com. If you have the need for a lawyer, knowledgeable, compassionate, successful trial lawyers, go to aa-legal.com. The Jason Wright Agency, you have insurance needs, Jason Wright can take care of you. Jason Wright, AGEN on Twitter, Jason Wright Agency on Facebook. Lots of local businesses are finding ways to function in the current environment. Our friends at Wild Heaven are still doing lots of different things. I think they actually introduced a new beer specifically over the weekend as well. You can pick that up at their Avondale or West End locations. Our friends at Reformation Brewery are dropping new product out there. They're doing curbside stuff. Both of them also have coffee options as well, so keep that in mind if you're not a beer drinker. Lots of restaurants are still out and doing curbside delivery, doing takeout, doing all kinds of different ways to get their stuff out to you. So we have a page over at 929thegame.com with businesses that are still functioning, and there are also there's a way to submit your business that and to share what they're doing. So go check that out over at 929thegame.com.
And don't forget, you can do the same thing over at our site. Let us know what's going on. We'll retweet that and like that and send that info out as well.
All right, we'll be back tomorrow with our Tactics Tuesday show. Be watching and tweeting about all of the MLS historical celebrations today. So enjoy it. That 4 o'clock watch along with Winalda, Agus, Hamid, and Goss. That might be a must watch with Winalda talking about the early days of MLS.
Yes.
Could be some wild stories being told there. Should be a fun one. Looking forward to it. So enjoy the day. We'll be back tomorrow. Mucho platiel.
Mucho platiel.